Commander Sarah Chun stood at the observation deck of the human embassy ship Defiance, watching the massive galactic council station rotate slowly in the void. The structure was a monument to alien superiority, crystalline spires that housed a dozen different species, all united in their belief that humanity was nothing more than a useful tool. For 3 years, Earth had been part of the Galactic Council. 3 years of being treated like children who needed constant supervision. 3 years of having their technology improved by alien oversight, their colonies guided by council administrators, and their military advised by species who had never faced real adversity. Sarah's communicator buzzed. "Commander, we're receiving the Council's latest directive." She turned from the viewport and walked to the command center. Her aide, Lieutenant Marcus Webb, handed her a data pad with a grim expression. "They want us to abandon the Kepler 442b colony," Webb said quietly. "Immediate evacuation. They're giving it to the Zalani Collective as a more suitable administrative zone." Sarah's jaw tightened. Kepler 442b wasn't just another world. It was home to 60,000 human settlers who had spent 5 years turning barren rock into farmland. Children had been born there. Lives had been built from nothing. On what grounds? She asked, though she already knew the answer. The usual: inefficient resource allocation and inadequate environmental stewardship. The Zalani apparently have better terraforming technology. Sarah laughed bitterly. The Zalani were slug-like beings who preferred swamp worlds. They would flood the carefully cultivated plains that human families had died to create. Everything those settlers had built would be destroyed within a year. The doors to the command center hissed open. Ambassador Elena Rodriguez entered, her usually calm face showing cracks of strain. Behind her came Dr. James Harrison, Earth's chief scientist on the station, and General Marcus Thompson, the highest-ranking human military officer in Council space. "You've all seen the directive?" Sarah asked. They nodded. Elena spoke first. "I've already filed a formal protest. The Council will review it in 3 months. 3 months. General Thompson repeated with disgust. "They want the colony evacuated in 2 weeks, but they'll take 3 months to consider our objections." "How convenient." Dr. Harrison pulled up a holographic display showing human colonies across Council space. Red markers began appearing on world after world. "This isn't just about Kepler 442b. I've been tracking the pattern. In the last 6 months, humans have been removed from 7 worlds. Always for efficiency reasons. Always to make room for other species. It's systematic," Elena said. "They're slowly pushing us out of any world worth having. Look at where they're offering as replacements." New markers appeared in yellow. Marginal worlds with thin atmospheres, extreme weather, or barely adequate resources. Sarah studied the display. Each red marker represented thousands of human lives disrupted, families torn apart, communities destroyed. And for what? So that species who had never worked for anything could take what humans had built with their own hands. "There's more," Dr. Harrison continued. "The technology sharing agreements are completely one-sided. We give them everything: fusion power, quantum computing, genetic therapy techniques. In return, they give us outdated equipment and lecture us about responsible development." General Thompson nodded grimly. "My people have been monitoring Council military movements. They're positioning peacekeeping fleets near every major human world. They call it protection, but those ships have enough firepower to glass a planet." The weight of realization settled over the room. This wasn't just bureaucratic bullying anymore. The Council was systematically dismantling human presence in the galaxy while positioning themselves to prevent any resistance. "We need to contact Earth," Sarah said. "President Martinez needs to know what's happening out here." Elena shook her head. "All communications to Earth are now being filtered for security by the Council. Our reports are delayed by weeks, if they get through at all, and any message that might be considered inflammatory is simply blocked." The isolation was complete. Millions of humans scattered across dozens of worlds, cut off from each other and from home, being slowly squeezed out of existence by beings who smiled and spoke of cooperation while holding knives behind their backs. Sarah walked back to the viewport and looked out at the council station. Beautiful and cold like the species that built it. They had made one critical mistake, though. They thought humans were just another client race to be managed and controlled. They had no idea what desperate humans were capable of. Commander? Webb's voice was uncertain. What are your orders? Sarah was quiet for a long moment, thinking about the families on Kepler 442b who were about to lose everything. Thinking about the human colonies being stripped away one by one. Thinking about Earth, isolated and probably unaware of what was happening to its children among the stars. The Council had pushed too far. They had backed humanity into a corner and assumed humans would simply accept their fate like good little clients. They were about to learn why that was a fatal miscalculation. Get me secure communications with every human ship, station, and colony in Council space, she said quietly. Use the old military encryption code from before we joined the Council. Commander, that's against Council regulations, Webb warned. Sarah turned to face him. Her eyes were hard as steel. The Council just declared war on humanity. They just don't know it yet. Elena stepped forward. Sarah, we can't what? Fight back. Protect our people? The Council has made it clear they plan to erase human presence from the galaxy piece by piece. They're counting on us being civilized enough to just take it. She looked at each of them in turn. How many more colonies will we lose before we say enough? How many more families will be torn apart? How many more worlds will we hand over to species who never had to fight for anything? General Thompson was the first to nod. What did you have in mind? We warn everyone. Every human commander, every colonial governor, every ship captain. We tell them what's really happening, and we give them a choice. They can submit to Council authority and watch everything they've built be taken away piece by piece, or they can remember what it means to be human. Dr. Harrison looked nervous. The Council has superior numbers and technology. If this becomes an open conflict, then we make sure it doesn't stay open for long, Sarah interrupted. Humans don't fight fair, Doctor. We never have. That's how our ancestors survived when everything was trying to kill them, and it's how we'll survive this. She turned back to the viewport. The Council station looked the same as always, serene and untouchable. But appearances could be deceiving. The beings inside that station were about to discover that they had made the worst mistake of their very long lives. They had underestimated humanity. Webb, start sending those communications. Use priority encryption and route them through our navigation satellites so the Council can't track them easily. Yes, Commander. What's the message? Sarah smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. It was the smile of a predator that had been caged too long and was finally seeing an opening. Tell them the rules just changed. As the Defiance began transmitting coded signals across human space, Sarah watched the Council station and thought about what was coming. The Council believed they held all the cards. They had the numbers, the technology, the established power structure. They thought humans were just another species to be managed. They were about to learn the difference between managing a species and trying to cage one. Because humans weren't just another alien race that could be pushed around. They were the species that had crawled out of caves and conquered a world full of creatures bigger and stronger than them. They were the species that had looked at an empty, hostile galaxy and decided to make it home. And when you push humans too far, they didn't break. They scattered. And scattered humans were the most dangerous kind. The revolution was about to begin. Captain Maria Santos was inspecting the hydroponics bay of the cargo vessel Wanderer when her communications officer found her among the growing vegetables. The ship was 3 days out from the mining colony on Tau Ceti Prime, carrying supplies and news from the inner systems. Captain, we're receiving a priority burst transmission on the old military frequencies, Ensign Park reported, his voice careful and low. It's from Commander Chun on the embassy ship. Maria straightened, dirt from the tomato plants still on her hands. The old military frequencies hadn't been used since Earth joined the Council. Using them now meant something was seriously wrong. Route it to my quarters. Full encryption, and make sure no Council monitors pick it up. 10 minutes later, Maria sat in her small cabin listening to Sarah Chen's message. Her face grew darker with each word. When it finished, she sat in silence for several minutes, staring at the blank screen. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Come in. Her first officer, David Liu, entered. His expression was grim. I assume you got the same message. You heard it too? The whole crew did, Captain. Word spreads fast on a ship this size. David sat down across from her. The question is, what do we do about it? Maria considered their situation. The Wanderer was a civilian cargo ship with minimal weapons and no armor. In a straight fight with Council forces, they would last about as long as a candle in a hurricane. But humans had never been about straight fights. How many crew do we have who served in Earth's military before the Council? About half. 12 veterans out of 24 crew members. What? Maria pulled up her ship's current cargo manifest. Medical supplies, industrial equipment, food concentrates, and communication gear bound for the mining colony. Nothing obviously military, but in the right hands, almost anything could be a weapon. Because we're about to become something the Council hasn't seen before. We're going to become a human ship that doesn't follow Council rules. Over the next several hours, the message spread like wildfire through human space. Every ship captain, every colonial administrator, every outpost commander received the same coded transmission. Some dismissed it as hysteria. Others were afraid to act. But many began to see patterns they had ignored before. On New Geneva, Colonial Governor Patricia Walsh called an emergency meeting of her senior staff. The agricultural world had been humanity's most successful colony, feeding dozens of systems with its massive farms. It was also next on the Council's list for administrative reorganization. I've been reviewing our agreements with the Council, she announced to the assembled administrators. Dr. Chen's message made me look closer at the fine print. Did any of you realize that under Section 47C, the Council can requisition our entire grain harvest if they declare a regional food security emergency? Her agricultural minister, Robert Kim, nodded grimly. I've been tracking unusual movements in Council cargo ships. They've been building massive storage facilities in 3 systems, enough to hold the production of entire worlds. They're planning to take our food, Patricia said flatly. All of it. And then they'll sell it back to us at whatever price they choose. In the Kepler system, aboard the battlecruiser Retribution, Admiral Zhang Wei was having a similar conversation with his fleet commanders. The Retribution was supposed to be under Council authority, its weapons locked down and its movements restricted. But Admiral Zhang had been preparing for this day since the moment Earth signed the accession treaty. Gentlemen, we have a choice, he told the holographic images of his captains. We can follow Council orders and watch them dismantle everything we've built, or we can remember our oath to protect humanity. Captain Torres of the destroyer Fierce spoke first. Admiral, my crew is ready. We've been watching them position peacekeeping fleets for months. They're not trying to protect us. They're surrounding us. My thoughts exactly. Captain Morrison, what's the status of the weapon locks? Captain Morrison of the cruiser, Defiant, smiled. What weapon locks, Admiral? I'm afraid my engineering team has been having terrible problems with the Council's control systems. Complete failures across all critical systems. Zhang nodded approvingly. His engineers have been quietly working on those failures for months. Every ship in his fleet now had full control of its weapons, despite what the Council computers believed. But the most important conversation was happening in a small repair shop on the edge of human space. Dr. Emily Watson, who had left Earth's weapons research program to become a simple mechanic, was talking to her assistant about a very special project they had been working on in secret. The Council thinks they understand human technology, she said, running her hands over the sleek hull of what looked like an ordinary repair drone. They've cataloged all our weapons, all our ships, all our defenses. They think they know exactly what we're capable of. Her assistant, Tom Bradley, grinned. They don't know about the Ghost Fleet. Emily nodded. For 2 years, she and a network of human engineers had been building ships that didn't exist on any official registry, using salvage parts, hidden manufacturing facilities, and brilliant improvisation, they had constructed a fleet of vessels that the Council had never seen and couldn't track. The ships weren't pretty. They were cobbled together from spare parts and powered by jury-rigged reactors. But they were fast, hard to detect, and carried weapons that no Council database had ever recorded. "How many do we have operational?" Emily asked. 47 ships of various sizes. Most of them are fighters or light corvettes, but we have 6 destroyers and 2 heavy cruisers, all crewed by volunteers who were officially listed as dead or missing. It was a small fleet compared to the Council's massive armadas. But it was a fleet that didn't exist, crewed by people who weren't supposed to be alive, carrying weapons that weren't supposed to work. As news of Commander Chen's message spread, something began to happen that the Council had never expected. Humans started to disappear. Ships that were supposed to be following trade routes suddenly went dark. Colonial administrators stopped responding to Council directives. Research stations reported complete communication failures. Military vessels claimed system malfunctions that prevented them from following orders. From the Council's perspective, it looked like the human communication network was simply falling apart. Technical problems, equipment failures, the expected growing pains of integrating a primitive species into a sophisticated galactic civilization. They had no idea that it was coordinated. Captain Santos made her first move 3 days after receiving the message. The Wanderer was supposed to deliver its cargo to Tau Ceti Prime and then proceed to a Council inspection station for routine maintenance. Instead, Maria changed course. Ensign Park, transmit the following message to the mining colony. Cargo delivery delayed due to engine problems. Will arrive at secondary location for emergency repairs. Use the standard commercial codes. This secondary location was actually a hidden asteroid base that humans had been building in secret for months. The engine problems were a code phrase that meant the revolution had started. When the Wanderer docked at the asteroid base, Maria was amazed at what she found. Dozens of human ships were already there, from tiny personal craft to massive cargo haulers. The base itself was bustling with activity as crews unloaded supplies and prepared for what was coming. A woman in maintenance coveralls approached her as she disembarked. "Captain Santos? I am Dr. Watson. Welcome to Haven Base." "Doctor, how many ships do you have here?" Emily smiled. "Right now, about 80 vessels, but more arriving every hour. Your cargo manifest mentioned medical supplies and communication equipment. We could really use both." As Maria toured the base, she realized the scope of what was happening. This wasn't just a refugee camp or a hiding place. It was a military installation designed to support a completely new kind of warfare. The docking bays were full of ships that looked like nothing she had ever seen. Sleek fighters built from parts of a dozen different vessels. Cargo ships that had been converted into missile platforms. Even civilian shuttles that now bristled with weapons and sensor equipment. "How long have you been planning this?" she asked Dr. Watson. "Since the day we joined the Council. Some of us never trusted their promises. We've been preparing for the day when talking stopped working and humans had to remember how to fight." In his command center aboard the Retribution, Admiral Zhang was coordinating with resistance cells across human space. The holographic displays showed a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy with hundreds of small green lights scattered throughout Council territory. Each light represented a human ship, station, or colony that had gone dark to Council oversight. Some had mechanical failures that prevented communication. Others had suffered mysterious computer viruses that wiped their databases. A few had simply vanished entirely, their crews claiming ignorance about their whereabouts. "Status report," Zhang requested. 17 military vessels have joined the Ghost Fleet, reported Captain Torres. 43 civilian ships are now operating independently. 22 colonies have declared communication emergencies that prevent them from receiving Council directives. And the Council's response? They're calling it infrastructure degradation due to inadequate human maintenance protocols. They've authorized a task force to investigate the technical problems and provide assistance. Zhang smiled grimly. The Council's arrogance was their greatest weakness. They were so convinced of their own superiority that they couldn't imagine humans were capable of organized resistance. Every disappearing ship, every failed communication, every technical malfunction was just proof that humans needed more supervision. They had no idea that the technical malfunctions were deliberate. They couldn't conceive that the primitive humans they looked down on were actually running a sophisticated deception operation right under their noses. But the most impressive part of the human resistance wasn't the ships or the weapons or the secret bases. It was the people. Across the galaxy, millions of humans were making the same choice. They were choosing to be human rather than being good council citizens. On New Geneva, Governor Walsh was quietly organizing the evacuation of critical personnel and resources. To the council, it looked like normal agricultural logistics. In reality, she was moving everything valuable off-world before the council could seize it. In research stations throughout human space, scientists were copying their data and destroying the originals. The council would find empty labs and erase computers when they came to confiscate human innovations. In the shipyards above Earth, workers were mysteriously making mistakes. Critical components were installed incorrectly. Software had bugs that caused random shutdowns. Weapons systems failed their tests for no apparent reason. The ships being built for the council would look impressive, but they would be nearly useless in actual combat. The message had spread, and humanity was responding, not as the council expected, with submission and acceptance, but as humans had always responded to existential threats. They were adapting, improvising, and preparing to do whatever it took to survive. The council still thought they were dealing with a few technical problems and isolated incidents of human stubbornness. They had no idea that they had just made themselves the target of an entire species that had learned warfare from predators and survival from extinction. The Ghost Fleet was growing. The resistance was spreading, and somewhere in the hidden bases and secret shipyards of human space, the counterattack was being prepared. The council had pushed humanity too far. Now they were about to learn what happened when humans pushed back. High Counselor Vextar stood before the massive viewing screen in the council's central command chamber, his crystalline form shimmering with barely contained frustration. The three-dimensional display showed the human sectors of the galaxy, dotted with warning indicators and system alerts. Explain to me again how an entire star destroyer simply vanishes, he said to the Zelanti administrator floating in the nutrient tank beside him. Administrator Glubmoth's tentacles writhed nervously. The Sovereigns was conducting a routine inspection of the human colony ship New Horizon. They reported finding evidence of unauthorized weapons modifications and were preparing to escort the vessel to a council facility for proper evaluation. And then, communication was lost. When our patrol fleet arrived at the coordinates 6 hours later, they found only empty space. No wreckage, no energy signatures, no trace of either ship. Vextar's form flickered to a deeper shade of blue, indicating severe displeasure. In his 3 centuries of council service, he had never encountered a client species that caused such persistent problems. The humans had been integrated into council civilization for barely 3 years, and already they were responsible for more technical difficulties than the previous 50 client races combined. This is the 4th vessel we've lost while dealing with human compliance issues, noted Counselor Tyska, her serpentine body coiled around her floating platform. The pattern is becoming difficult to ignore. The truth was worse than Tyska realized. The disappearances weren't random technical failures. They were surgical strikes by an enemy the Council had never imagined could exist. 6 hours earlier, Captain Robert Hayes of the human colony ship New Horizon had been facing the worst moment of his life. His ship carried 8,000 civilians, families fleeing the forced evacuation of their homeworld. They had nowhere to go except a barely habitable planet that the Council had designated as their new home. The Sovereigns had intercepted them at the edge of the system, demanding to inspect their cargo holds for unauthorized materials. Captain Hayes knew what they would find: weapons, military-grade shields, and communication equipment that officially didn't exist. Evidence that would give the Council an excuse to scatter his people across a dozen prison worlds. Then, the impossible happened. Contact on sensors, his tactical officer reported. Unknown vessel decloaking off our starboard bow. The ship that materialized looked like nothing Captain Hayes had ever seen. It was clearly of human construction, but built with a savage functionality that spoke of desperate times and brilliant improvisation. Weapons that looked like they had been ripped from a dozen different ships. Armor plating that appeared to be welded together from salvaged hull sections. Engines that glowed with an angry red light that suggested they were running far beyond safe parameters. "This is Captain Sarachun of the human defense ship Reaper," came a voice over the communications channel. "We're here to help." What followed was less a battle than a demonstration. The Reaper didn't try to outfight the larger Council vessel. Instead, it simply made it disappear. "How?" Captain Hayes asked later, as both human ships jumped to safety in a hidden system that the Council had never mapped. "Teleportation technology," explained Dr. Harrison, who was aboard the Reaper as part of its science team. "We reverse-engineered it from capture Council equipment and improved on it. We can now move entire ships instantly across interstellar distances. The Council can do that. Not like this. Their teleportation requires massive installations and enormous energy expenditures. We figured out how to do it with a device that fits in a cargo bay." Sometimes being primitive has its advantages. The Sovereign's will was now sitting in a star system that didn't exist on any Council charts, its crew imprisoned, and its databases being systematically downloaded by human technicians. It was the fourth Council vessel to suffer this fate in the past month. Back in the Council chamber, Vextar was beginning to understand that they were dealing with something far more serious than technical problems or civil disobedience. "Show me the full scope of the situation," he commanded. The display expanded to show the entire galaxy. Red indicators marked Council fleets and installations. Blue showed human populations and known ship movements. But scattered throughout Council space were hundreds of yellow markers, human ships, and installations that had simply vanished from Council surveillance. 73 human vessels are currently unaccounted for, reported the Valdari intelligence officer from her perch. 42 colonies have stopped responding to Council directives. 16 research stations have been evacuated for unexplained emergencies. And our inspection teams have found evidence of systematic sabotage in human-built infrastructure throughout the sector. Vextar studied the pattern. It wasn't random. The disappearances followed clear strategic principles, targeting key systems and removing human assets from Council control in a carefully coordinated sequence. "This is organized resistance," he said finally. "The humans are in rebellion." Councillor Fiska's scales darkened with concern. "Impossible. Humans are a client species. They lack the technology and military capability to challenge Council authority. This must be a misunderstanding. Show her the footage from the Kepler incident," Vextar ordered. A new display activated, showing grainy sensor data from a Council patrol that had been investigating reports of suspicious activity near a supposedly abandoned mining facility. What they found was a fully operational military base that shouldn't have existed. The base appears to be constructed entirely from salvaged materials and improvised technology, the intelligence officer explained. However, our analysis indicates defensive capabilities that rival our own military installations. The footage showed human ships unlike anything in Council databases. Fighters that moved with impossible agility. Destroyers that carried firepower normally reserved for battleships. And in the center of it all, a massive construction that looked like someone had taken pieces from 100 different vessels and welded them into something new. "The humans call it Haven Base," the officer continued. "Intelligence suggests it's one of several such installations they've constructed in secret." THWSSK's scales went completely black. "How long have they been building these bases?" "Our best estimate is since shortly after their integration into Council civilization. Perhaps before." The implications were staggering. While the Council had been congratulating themselves on successfully integrating another client species, the humans had been preparing for war. They had used Council technology, Council trade routes, and Council protection to build a military infrastructure that the Council had never suspected existed. "We've been played," Vextar said quietly. "From the very beginning, we've been played." In the hidden depths of Haven Base, Commander Sarachun was coordinating the largest military operation in human history. The command center buzzed with activity as reports came in from across the galaxy. "Ghost Fleet Alpha is in position near the Procyon sector," reported Admiral Zhang over the secure channel. "Council Task Force 47 has no idea we're here." "Acknowledged, Admiral." "Colonial Squadron Beta, what's your status?" Governor Walsh's image appeared on another screen. "All civilian assets have been evacuated from the primary worlds. We've left behind complete infrastructure, but we've removed everything that matters: people, data, genetic samples, industrial templates. If the Council wants our worlds, they can have empty dirt." "Excellent. Dr. Watson, how are our special projects progressing?" Emily Watson grinned from her workshop aboard the modified Carrier Phoenix. Behind her, technicians were making final adjustments to devices that looked like they belonged in a nightmare. "The quantum viruses are ready for deployment. Once we upload them to the Council's network, their computer systems will experience cascade failures that will take years to repair. We've also completed the dimensional mines. Any Council ship that tries to use their standard hyperspace routes is going to find some very unpleasant surprises waiting for them." Sarah nodded approvingly. This was what the Council had never understood about humans. They saw a species that appeared primitive and assumed that meant inferior. They failed to realize that humans had survived by being adaptable, cunning, and utterly ruthless when necessary. "All units, listen carefully. The Council is beginning to understand that they're facing organized resistance. That means they'll start responding with serious force soon. Our window for surgical strikes is closing. It's time to move to the next phase." Around the galaxy, human commanders acknowledged their orders. Ships that had been hiding in the dark between stars began moving toward their targets. Secret bases that had been quietly building weapons and training soldiers prepared to reveal themselves. Colonies that had been playing the role of compliant Council citizens made ready to show their true nature. In the Council chamber, Vextar was meeting with the military commanders of a dozen species. The holographic displays showed fleet positions and strategic assessments. "The humans must be dealt with decisively," he declared. "They have shown that they cannot be trusted to remain as compliant client species. We must demonstrate that rebellion against Council authority will not be tolerated." General Korthak of the Mandari War, Cast, nodded his massive head. "My fleets are ready, High Counselor. Give the order, and we will pacify the human sectors within a standard month." "Excellent. How many vessels will you need?" 12 battle fleets should be more than sufficient. The humans have perhaps 200 ships of various types. Most are converted civilian vessels with minimal combat capability. My warriors will crush them easily. Vextar felt a moment of satisfaction. The humans had been clever, certainly more clever than expected. But cleverness meant nothing when faced with overwhelming force. The Council had been building its military might for millennia. No single species could stand against the combined power of a galactic civilization. "Deploy the fleets. But I want prisoners, General, particularly any humans involved in organizing this rebellion. The Council needs to understand how this happened so it never happens again." As the Council's war machine began to mobilize, Sarah Chun stood on the observation deck of Haven Base, watching the final preparations for humanity's response. The base was nearly empty now. Most of the ships had already departed for their assigned positions. The civilians had been evacuated to hidden colonies in uncharted systems. The military personnel were scattered across 1,000 different vessels, ready to fight a war unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. "Commander," Lieutenant Webb approached with a final status report. "All units report ready. The Ghost Fleet is in position. The special weapons are armed. Our people are as prepared as they'll ever be." Sarah nodded, thinking about the long journey that had brought them to this moment. 3 years ago, humanity had been so excited to join the galaxy's great civilization. They had imagined themselves as junior partners in a grand cosmic community, learning from elder species and contributing their own unique perspectives. Instead, they had found themselves marked for slow extinction by beings who saw them as nothing more than useful animals to be managed and eventually disposed of. But the Council had made a crucial error. They had assumed that because humans were new to space, they were naive about conflict. They had no idea that humanity's entire history was a story of survival against impossible odds. They didn't understand that humans had spent millions of years learning to fight smarter, not harder. Signal all units, Sarah ordered. Operation Scattershot is now active. All human forces are to engage at will. Show the Council what happens when they push humanity too far. Across the galaxy, the counterattack began. It didn't look like any war the Council had ever seen. There were no massive fleet engagements or dramatic battles. Instead, Council forces simply began disappearing. Supply convoys vanished between systems. Communication relays went offline without explanation. Military installations reported equipment failures that turned out to be sophisticated sabotage. Patrol fleets found themselves stranded in empty space when their hyperspace drives mysteriously malfunctioned. And everywhere Council forces turned, they found evidence of human presence, but never the humans themselves. The humans had scattered, just as Sarachon had promised. But scattered didn't mean defeated. It meant they were everywhere, and the Council had no idea where to strike back. The war for humanity's survival had begun. Target destroyed, Captain. The Council supply depot is now a cloud of expanding debris. No survivors. Casualties on our side? None. We were gone before their patrol ships even knew we were there. Elena nodded with satisfaction, but also with a growing sense of the enormity of what they were attempting. The Phantom was one of 40 ships in Ghost Fleet Charlie, and they were just one small part of a much larger strategy. Navigation. Set course for Rally Point 7. We need to resupply and get our next assignment. As the Phantom engaged its experimental drive system and vanished into the space between dimensions, Elena thought about the war they were fighting. The Council expected humans to mass their forces and engage in the kind of honorable fleet actions that had characterized galactic warfare for millennia. Instead, humans were fighting the way they had always fought when facing superior enemies. They were using speed, stealth, and ruthless pragmatism to turn their enemies' strengths against them. The Council had massive fleets and superior firepower, so humans refused to give them targets to shoot at. The Council had better armor and shields, so humans developed weapons that bypassed conventional defenses. The Council had more ships and personnel, so humans turned the galaxy itself into a weapon. Rally Point 7 was a hidden asteroid base in a system that didn't appear on any Council charts. As the Phantom docked, Elena was amazed to see how much the operation had grown in just a few weeks. Dozens of ships were being refitted and rearmed. Weapons that looked like they belonged in a science fiction nightmare were being loaded onto vessels that had started life as civilian cargo haulers. Dr. Emily Watson met Elena at the airlock, her face showing the strain of weeks without adequate sleep. Captain Rodriguez, perfect timing. We've got your new toy ready for testing. She led Elena to a cargo bay where technicians were installing something that looked like a mechanical flower made of pure violence. Multiple weapon barrels surrounded a central core that pulsed with ominous energy. What is it? We call it a quantum shredder. It fires micro black holes that exist for exactly 0.3 seconds before evaporating. Long enough to punch through any known armor, short enough to avoid destabilizing local space-time. Elena Wislid apreciatole. How many shots before it overloads? About 50. After that, you need to replace the entire core assembly. But 50 shots of this thing will destroy anything short of battle station. Speaking of battle stations, any word on the Council's response to our activities? Emily's expression darkened. They're mobilizing everything. Intelligence reports indicate they're pulling fleets from across the galaxy. Looks like they're planning a massive offensive to crush the rebellion once and for all. How massive? Best estimate? 2,000 ships. Enough firepower to sterilize every human world in the galaxy. Elena felt her stomach drop. 2,000 ships was more than humanity had ever faced before. Even with their technological advantages and unconventional tactics, those were overwhelming odds. What's the plan? Commander Chun has something special in mind. She's calling it Operation Prometheus. All Ghost Fleet commanders are being recalled for a strategy briefing in 6 hours. 6 hours later, Elena found herself aboard Haven Base, which had been rebuilt in a new location after evacuating its previous position. The command center was packed with ship captains, colonial administrators, and military officers. At the center of it all stood Sarah Chun, looking like she hadn't slept in days, but somehow more determined than ever. Ladies and gentlemen, the situation is exactly what we expected. The Council is mobilizing the largest fleet in galactic history to destroy us. They intend to make an example of humanity that will discourage future rebellions for the next 1,000 years. The holographic display showed a massive red cloud moving toward human space. 2,000 ships, representing the military might of dozens of species, all focused on the single goal of ending human resistance. They have us outnumbered 10 to 1. Their ships are larger, better armed, and more heavily armored than ours. In a conventional engagement, we would be annihilated in minutes. Elena could see the tension in the room. Every person here knew the odds they faced. Some were already calculating the chances of escape, the possibility of running deeper into uncharted space, and building a life in exile. Fortunately, Sarah continued with a smile that was absolutely terrifying, we don't fight conventionally. Dr. Watson, would you explain what we've been building? Emily stepped forward, her own smile matching Sarah's for sheer predatory intensity. For the past month, we've been constructing something the galaxy has never seen before. We call it the Prometheus device. The display changed to show technical schematics that made Elena's engineering training rebel against what she was seeing. It looked like someone had taken a Star Destroyer, removed everything except the engines and power core, and replaced the weapons with something that shouldn't exist. The device uses quantum entanglement to create a localized space-time distortion field. In simple terms, it can make an entire star system temporarily elsewhere. Elsewhere, asked Admiral Jean. Outside normal space-time, unreachable by conventional means. While the effect is active, anything within the field simply doesn't exist from the perspective of the outside universe. Elena stared at the schematic. How long can you maintain the effect? Approximately 48 hours with our current power systems. After that, the field collapses and everything returns to normal space-time. And the tactical application? Sarah took over again. The Council fleet is heading for the Sol system. They intend to destroy Earth and use humanity's homeworld as an example to other species who might consider rebellion. They expect to find our scattered forces and annihilate them in detail. Instead, they're going to find something very different. We're going to give them the largest fleet engagement in galactic history. And then we're going to make sure nobody ever hears about it. The plan was audacious even by human standards. Instead of scattering and hiding, they were going to concentrate every ship, every weapon, and every advantage they had developed into one massive ambush. The entire human fleet would meet the Council Armada in the Sol system. And then, win or lose, they would activate the Prometheus device and make the entire battle disappear from history. If we win, we reveal the system after the effect ends and show the galaxy that Council forces can be defeated. If we lose, Sarah shrugged. Well, dead heroes can't be tortured for information or used as propaganda tools. Either way, we deny the Council their victory. Over the next week, human ships from across the galaxy began converging on the Sol system. Not in a desperate flight toward home, but in a carefully coordinated military maneuver that would determine the fate of their species. The ghost fleets emerged from hiding. Secret shipyards revealed vessels that had never appeared on any registry. Weapons platforms that had been disguised as mining equipment activated and moved toward Earth. Colonial militias armed with equipment that officially didn't exist prepared for the fight of their lives. And in the system's outer reaches, the Prometheus device waited, a ship-sized machine that could rewrite the laws of physics and make an entire battle vanish from the universe. The Council fleet was 3 days away from Sol. They expected to find scattered human forces running in panic from their superior firepower. They had planned a quick, decisive campaign that would crush human resistance and serve as a warning to other client species. Instead, they were about to discover what happened when humans stopped running and decided to make their stand. General Korthak stood on his bridge, watching the preliminary sensor scans of the Sol system. What he saw made his blood run cold. The humans weren't running. They were waiting, and they had brought everything they had. High Counselor Vextar materialized his holographic form aboard the flagship Divine Authority as the Council Armada entered the Sol system. Behind him, 2,000 of the galaxy's most advanced warships moved in perfect formation, a demonstration of power that should have terrified any species into immediate surrender. Instead, what they found waiting for them was impossible. General Korthak, Vextar said, his crystalline form flickering with confusion, "Explain what I'm seeing on these sensors." The massive Mandari general studied the tactical displays with professional interest. It appears the humans have assembled their entire fleet in Earth's orbital space. Approximately 200 vessels of various types, arranged in defensive formations around their homeworld. That's not what I mean, and you know it. Korthak's mandibles clicked nervously. "Sir, the human vessels are unusual. Our combat databases cannot identify most of their ship types. The weapons signatures we're detecting don't match any known technology." "Show me." The main display zoomed in on the human fleet. What they saw defied everything the Council knew about starship construction. Ships that appear to be built from salvage components, and improvised designs bristled with weapons that had no classification. Fighters moved in patterns that suggested impossible acceleration capabilities. Capital ships hung in space like predators waiting to strike. And at the center of it all, surrounding Earth itself, was something that made Vextar's crystalline matrix resonate with unease. "What is that structure?" he demanded. Admiral Tichwiseska slithered closer to the display, her serpentine body coiling as she studied the readings. "It appears to be some kind of space station, but the energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. The power output alone suggests technology far beyond what humans should possess. Could it be a weapon? Unknown. High Counselor. Our scans are being blocked by some form of quantum interference. Whatever it is, it's generating massive amounts of exotic energy." Vextar felt the first stirrings of doubt. The humans were supposed to be a primitive species with limited technology and no military tradition beyond their own planet. This fleet looked nothing like what their intelligence reports had predicted. "Open a communication channel," he ordered. "Perhaps we can still resolve this without unnecessary bloodshed." The transmission that came back was audio only, but the voice was unmistakably human. Calm, professional, and absolutely implacable. "This is Commander Sarachun of a human defense force. You are trespassing in sovereign human space. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Vextar's form flared with indignation. "This is High Counselor Vextar of the Galactic Council. You will surrender your vessels and submit to Council authority. Your rebellion ends here." "I don't think you understand the situation, Counselor. You came here expecting to find scattered refugees running from your superior firepower. Instead, you found us waiting. We're not the same species that begged for membership in your council 3 years ago. You have 200 ships. We have 2,000. Your defiance is admirable, but pointless." Sarah's laugh was cold as space itself. "Numbers aren't everything, Counselor. Would you like a demonstration?" Before Vextar could respond, the impossible happened. 3 ships from the human fleet simply vanished and reappeared inside the council formation. The vessels that materialized among the council ships looked like nightmares given form. Angular, predatory designs covered in weapons that glowed with malevolent energy. Before the Council forces could react, the human ships opened fire. What followed wasn't a battle, it was a massacre. Weapons that fired micro-black holes punched through Council armor like paper. Energy beams that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously bypassed shields entirely. Missiles that folded space-time delivered warheads directly into enemy engine cores. In less than 30 seconds, 12 Council vessels were destroyed and another 8 were crippled. Then, the human ships vanished again, reappearing in their original positions as if nothing had happened. That was 3 ships, Sarah's voice said calmly. We have 200. Care to reconsider your position? General Korthak stared at the tactical display showing the wreckage of his ships. In his centuries of military service, he had never seen anything like what just happened. The humans hadn't just demonstrated superior technology, they had completely rewritten the rules of space combat. How, he whispered. How is this possible? You want to know how we developed such capabilities? Sarah asked, somehow hearing his whisper across the communication channel. Let me tell you about human innovation, General. When we joined your council, we gave you fusion power, quantum computing, genetic therapy, and a dozen other technologies that took us millennia to develop. In return, you gave us your scraps and told us to be grateful. The human fleet began to move, not in the chaotic rush of desperate defenders, but with the precision of a military force that knew exactly what it was doing. But you made a mistake. You assumed that because we were new to space, we were incapable of understanding galactic technology. You let us examine your ships, your weapons, your databases. You thought you were teaching primitive savages to be proper civilized beings. More human ships were moving now, taking positions that surrounded the Council fleet on 3 dimensions. Somehow, impossibly, 200 ships were managing to encircle a force 10 times their size. Instead, you were giving the most innovative species in the galaxy access to technologies we had never imagined. Do you know what humans do when we encounter something new, Counselor? We take it apart. We figure out how it works. And then we make it better. Vextar watched the tactical display with growing horror. The human ships were moving through space in ways that violated basic physics. Some appeared to be existing in multiple locations simultaneously. Others seemed to be firing weapons from positions they had never occupied. Humans don't just adapt technology, Sarah continued. We weaponize everything. You showed us teleportation, so we built instant strike capability into every ship. You demonstrated dimensional technology, so we learned to fight in multiple space-time configurations simultaneously. You gave us access to quantum mechanics, so we built weapons that can delete matter from existence. This is impossible, Admiral Thy Seska hissed. No species develops this quickly. These advances should take centuries. That's the difference between us and you, Sarah replied. You species that joined the Council early became comfortable, safe. You stopped innovating because you didn't need to. We've been fighting for survival for millions of years. We never stopped. Suddenly, the space around the Council fleet began to shimmer and distort. Reality itself seemed to be bending, as if the universe was having trouble deciding what should exist and what shouldn't. What's happening? Vextar demanded. His science officer, a normally calm Valdari, was staring at her instruments with pure terror. High Counselor, we're detecting massive space-time distortions throughout the system. It's as if something is preparing to alter the fundamental structure of local reality. The Prometheus device, Sarah said, her voice now carrying an undertone of something that might have been regret. We gave you a chance to withdraw, Counselor. You chose to come here with enough firepower to destroy every human world in the galaxy. You made it clear that this ends with the complete destruction of one of our species. The distortions were growing stronger. Ships in the Council fleet were reporting instrument failures as their sensors try to process readings that violated known physics. So we're going to make sure it ends on our terms. You want to destroy humanity? Fine. But you're going to do it where nobody can see, where nobody can learn from it. where victory will never inspire fear in other species who might dare to resist council authority. Vextar finally understood what he was seeing. The humans weren't just prepared to fight. They were prepared to take the entire battle outside normal space-time, if necessary. Win or lose, they were going to deny the council its victory. "You're insane," he whispered. "No, counselor. We're human. And when humans are pushed too far, we don't break. We make sure that whoever pushed us regrets it forever." The Prometheus device activated fully, and reality screamed. Space twisted. Time folded. The entire Sol system became disconnected from the rest of the universe, existing in a bubble of altered physics where normal rules no longer applied. From the perspective of the galaxy outside, the system simply vanished, along with every ship that had been inside it. What followed was the largest space battle in galactic history, and the most advanced display of military technology ever assembled. Human ships that existed in multiple dimensions fought council vessels that were trying to understand weapons that deleted matter from existence. Fighters moved through folded space, while capital ships fired quantum cascade weapons that turned enemy armor into exotic particles. The battle raged for 18 hours. Both sides displayed capabilities that would have been considered impossible just days before. The council forces fought with the coordination and firepower of a dozen species. The humans fought with innovation and ruthlessness that redefined what warfare could be. In the end, the humans won. Not easily, not without losses, but decisively. The combination of superior technology, better tactics, and sheer desperate ingenuity proved too much for the council fleet. But the victory came at a cost that no one could have imagined. When the Prometheus device finally shut down and the Sol system returned to normal space-time, something had changed. The battle hadn't just been fought. It had been fought outside the normal flow of causality. The events that had transpired existed in a quantum superposition between having happened and never occurring at all. To the rest of the galaxy, the Council's great fleet had simply vanished while investigating the human rebellion. No wreckage was found. No survivors were recovered. 2,000 ships and their crews had disappeared without explanation. The official council report blamed the disaster on an encounter with unknown spatial phenomena in the Sol system. The human rebellion was listed as resolved through diplomatic means, with all surviving human settlements agreeing to relocate to designated sectors under council supervision. But in reality, something very different had occurred. Commander Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of Haven Base, now stationed openly in Earth orbit, watching the reconstruction efforts on the planet below. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. "Status report," she requested from her communications officer. "All human fleets have returned to their assigned positions. Colonial governments are reporting successful establishment of hidden bases in the uncharted sectors. Intelligence networks have been activated throughout Council space." And the Council's response? Complete information blackout. They're claiming the fleet was lost to natural phenomena. No mention of human involvement. Our analysis suggests they're trying to prevent other client species from learning that the Council can be defeated. Sarah nodded. It was exactly what she had expected. The Council couldn't admit that a single species had destroyed their largest fleet without triggering rebellions throughout their territory. So they had chosen to pretend it never happened, which suited humanity perfectly. "The good news is that officially, we don't exist anymore," she said to her senior staff. "The Council believes they've relocated all human populations to supervise colonies in distant sectors. They have no idea that millions of humans are still living throughout their territory in hidden settlements." Dr. Emily Watson looked up from her technical reports. "The better news is that we now have access to the wreckage of 2,000 Council ships. The technological intelligence we've gathered will keep our research teams busy for decades. And the Council will never see it coming," added Admiral Jean. "As far as they're concerned, the human problem has been solved. They'll go back to their normal routine while we prepare for the next phase." Sarah looked out at the stars, thinking about the long road ahead. Humanity had won its first battle for survival, but it had done so by disappearing from galactic history. They now existed in the shadows, unknown and unsuspected. It was exactly where they needed to be. "Begin Phase 2, she ordered. "Let's show the galaxy what happens when humans really get to work." Throughout Council space, the rebellion began again, but this time it was invisible. Human settlements that officially didn't exist began spreading to worlds that the Council had never explored. Ships that weren't supposed to be there started monitoring Council communications and mapping their defenses. Scientists who had allegedly been relocated began developing weapons that would make their previous innovations look primitive. The Council had pushed humanity too far, and humans had scattered just as Sarachon had predicted. But scattered humans weren't defeated humans. They were humans who were everywhere and nowhere, and completely free to be as dangerous as they needed to be. The Council thought they had one. In reality, they had just made themselves the target of an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't track, and couldn't understand. The war for humanity's survival was over. The war for humanity's future was just beginning.